You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. What are Catholics saying about the Pope's recent visit to Canada, where he apologised for the Catholic Church's role in the residential schools? We talked to Dr. Patrice Brodeur from the Institute of Religious Studies at the University of Montreal. But first, some news headlines. Immigration backlog leaves healthcare professionals unable to work. Couple with Indian roots racially assaulted by Starbucks employee. Play to question personal biases against ethnicities. And Pakistanis observe Kashmir Exploitation Day. Now the details. Immigration lawyers are saying that one of the worst immigration backlogs ever is stopping qualified healthcare professionals join the workforce. This comes during a nationwide staff shortage in hospitals. According to the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, there are around 26,000 nurses ready to join the workforce. Out of these, 14,000 are registered nurses. The association's CEO says that thousands have passed the required exams and are only waiting for their immigration status to change so that they can start work. Local media report that one applicant has waited 18 months for her immigration status to change, so that she can begin work as a nurse. Coffee chain Starbucks has responded promptly to a couple's complaint after a barista threw racial insults and a pop bottle at them. The couple with Indian roots were visiting the coffee shop in Sudbury, Ontario, Friday with their daughter. Starbucks Canada's spokesperson has told local media that the company holds itself accountable to be anti-racist and promotes inclusion, diversity, equity, and justice. Sudbury police are investigating the matter. The motivation behind the hostile interaction is still unknown. Playwright Susan Brown addresses racial bigotry through her new 2-act full-length play, Transit, for the Guelph Fringe Festival. The story revolves around two older white male friends coping with the quickly changing ethnic landscape around them. One of them confronts his own feelings of racial intolerance when a Muslim brother and sister buy his coffee shop. His friend helps him fight his bias. Brown says that she reached out to the Coalition of Muslim Women in Kitchener-Waterloo region for their input regarding her portrayal of the Muslim characters. Brown says that Transit was reflective of her own struggles against her own biases when she found herself in a rapidly evolving cultural landscape in her region. Rallies were held in Pakistan today to observe the 3rd anniversary of New Delhi's actions that stripped Indian-administered Kashmir of its special status. Islamabad observed the day as the Day of Exploitation to reiterate its condemnation of the August 5th move in 2019, which led to the disputed valley's annexation with Indian Union territory. The Indian government revoked Article 370 and other related provisions from its constitution, scrapping the state with its autonomy. Simultaneously, it locked the region down, detained thousands of people, imposed movement restrictions, and enforced a communications blackout. Kashmir, a Muslim-majority Himalayan region, is held by India and Pakistan in part, but claimed by both in full. A small side of the region is also controlled by China. Justice for All Canada and Friends of Kashmir Canada are holding a rally this weekend in Mississauga to show solidarity with Kashmiris. And that's it for the news. Pope Francis has made an historic trip to Canada with an equally historic apology to Indigenous peoples for the Church's role in residential schools over the centuries. Today, we have with us a Catholic scholar, Dr. Patrice Brodeur, who will talk to us about Catholic perspectives on this. We do hope to have an Indigenous perspective later on, but for the moment, we are with you, Dr. Patrice. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. I mentioned that it's a historic visit and an historic apology. Is it unprecedented? Have there been other occasions where there's been an apology from a pope?
Well, from a different pope, no, but there has been from this pope a process of apologizing when on a visit in Brazil to indigenous communities of the Amazon region, and it was intended, at least it seems to me, to address all of indigenous peoples throughout the Americas, but the news was barely covered at all in Canada, and so most indigenous peoples in Canada were not aware of that, or thought that it was not sufficient, especially after the discovery of the unknown children mass graves, and that really brought to light the importance of speeding the process on the part of the Vatican to come to have the Pope come in person to apologize after, of course, receiving the 3 delegations during the same week of First Nations, of Inuit people, as well as Métis peoples, and so that was what he was following up from having done that a few months ago in Rome, and now following up with his visit in Canada.
You might not be able to answer this question because I'm not sure it's a good one, but is this apology coming because it's Pope Francis and his own history as someone who's been concerned about marginalized people? Or do you think in 2022, no matter who the Pope was, this would have happened?
This is a very good question. Well, definitely his personality makes a big difference in his ability to, in the quality of his listening, of his compassionate listening, demonstrated on the visit of these 3 groups to Rome months ago. What's really clear to me is that it's not obvious necessarily that another pope at this point in time would have done so. Possibly, yes, given the timing and the context and the increased conversations and around decolonial discourse that is necessary to have in general in politics, but also in the theology of the Catholic Church. And so given that context, I think that it could have been also potentially another person, but definitely his leadership in this respect and his personal sort of qualities made it possible for him to do so.
It's not always easy to say sorry, let alone on a public stage like that with the international media looking. How do you think it's like from the Pope's perspective to have to get up and make these kinds of apologies?
I actually don't know, given that I've never been in such a situation. But I think that it is indeed difficult. It is difficult emotionally to be able to do that, but also because one needs to do it with a sense of deep truthfulness and coherence internally, spiritually, and that's only possible if one has already sort of a depth of understanding of the fears and of the traumas that Indigenous peoples have gone through, and after listening to the stories and the emotional sort of cost that these traumatic decades of the school system took on Indigenous communities, and not just those who actually suffered directly from it, but the families that lost or had sort of their kids taken away from them for years and then come back sort of transformed and broken often, and the overall sort of policy of basically genocide of Indigenous communities for decades is such that you have a situation where you need to have a tremendous amount of spiritual strength to ask for forgiveness in that context, to be sorry, demonstrate and ask for, saying that one is sorry, excuses are necessary, and therefore you need to ask for forgiveness. That's all on a personal level as a human being, sort of listening to other human beings. So that's one dimension of the answer. But the Pope is not just an individual. He's not just one person. He's also a representative of an institution that has had a long history, one of the longest history of religious communities worldwide. And in that context, I think that there are a number of people who have been critical of him not going far enough in his recognizing that forgiveness, asking for forgiveness for those individual Catholics who were part of creating the traumas to Indigenous communities is one thing. But
let's talk about that in a minute. But let me just circle back to something you'd said in a previous answer. You mentioned a change in theology. I think that Catholic scholars have been developing something called liberation theology, and now you mentioned decolonization theory. How is that part of current teachings in the Catholic Church?
Well, the Catholic Church, of course, has official doctrines, and the process of changing those over time is a natural phenomena over the centuries, but it often happens at a very slow speed, and often not quick enough for many people within the church, as well as those from outside, those who can be very critical at time of the current doctrines of the church. One of them, for example, is that the very old doctrine of discovery, which was used for centuries to legitimize sort of the Catholic working hand in hand with colonial powers to try to basically convert indigenous peoples to Roman Catholicism, and therefore in that context really being part of a racist discourse formulated theologically as the superiority of the Catholic belief over and against sort of any indigenous worldviews, cosmovisions, as they prefer to call them. And that, I think, is a process that is changing internally. And I think that we're already in a situation where the doctrine of dialogue, which has been promoted in the Catholic Church since 1965's Nostra Aetate encyclical, is helping in the process of discovering sort of the depth of the knowledges, local and trans-regional knowledges of indigenous communities that we can learn from as Catholics and as any other people that are not indigenous, and in that requires respect for those traditions and worldviews, and through this dialogue also beginning to hear the stories of all of those who were traumatically affected by the school system that basically imposed on them.
And you mentioned some people criticizing perhaps that apology is not enough, and now you've mentioned the doctrine of discovery, which people were asking to be formally rescinded. What do you think the next step should be? I'm sorry, and what comes?
Well, one of the hopes, and it seems like there is a direction. The Pope has hinted that that there will be a rescinding of the discovery of the doctrine of discovery relatively soon, and so that will be an important theological change officially by the Church, and so that I think would be a follow-up next step that is incredibly important. But in addition to that, there are restitutions that need to happen in terms of monetary compensation, part of agreements that were done in 2006, and that still needs to happen on a more systematic level throughout the communities across Canada, among other places around the world, and that is slow to happen, and it needs to happen because, of course, it's nice to talk about forgiveness, but if we want to have true healing, especially for those who are still very hurt and angry at this whole process over this whole historical process, but also the delays for the Catholic Church to have come and apologize. For those people, the justice piece is absolutely central prior to the healing being possible.
And is this controversial amongst the Catholic lay people, or how are they feeling about this visit and the apology?
No, I think that overall, I think that for most Catholics, I think they welcome sort of that gesture, and they understand its importance historically today, and they want to support this kind of transformation within the Church, recognizing and taking responsibility for its role together in cahoot with the government of different periods in promoting this genocide of Indigenous people through education, imposed education. And so I think that at this point in time, we're in a situation where we can see that the restitution process is going to take time, but it will happen slowly but surely. And there's a third piece to this as well, which is that some of the individuals who are still alive, who perpetrated different kinds of sexual abuse on children in those schools or within the communities where they were serving the Catholic Church in the Indigenous communities, that they be brought to justice before they pass away. And that for many Indigenous communities, it's about restitution of justice, very specifically to specific individuals.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're actually out of time. I know it's a big topic. We just scratched the surface, but thanks for joining us today.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe, and God bless.